Hello all, welcome to CyberWarFare AWS Cloud Red Team course. In this module, we will discuss about how we can take advantage of IAM to perform a privilege escalations. So basically, privilege escalation is techniques where a user have a limited privilege and find out a way to escalate his privilege. There may be possibility to perform we can say vertical privilege escalation or horizontal privilege escalations. So let's take a look how a users can abuse the IAM services to perform a privilege escalations. So as you can see here in the diagram, we have a user A which have a limited access on AWS services. Initially it's have a limited access. Why? Because only two policy which is attached to this user. One is list policy, so he or she can list down, IAM users, IAM rights, IAM role. And second one, this user have a put user policy. That means this user can change the policy to any other user or himself. So if this user have two policies, how this user can take advantage of this policy and can perform the privilege escalation. So this put user policy seems like interesting because user can change the policy, inline policy of any other user or himself. In this case, suppose if this user embedded a inline policy which is administrator policy to this user A, because he have rights to do that using this put user policy permissions. Now in this case, if this user embedded this policy to this user A, now the user A have these three policies or three permissions. One is the first one is list policy, this is their second one is put policy, and third one is administrator policy, which he embedded via rights of put user policy permissions. So these are the permission which is attached to this user. Now this is the before, and this is a before, and this is after. So this is how once this policy attached, this user have a full administrator access on AWS services. So this is how user can misuse or can take advantage of IAM policy and can perform a privilege escalation. Let's discuss about how we can practically perform all these activities. So suppose there is one scenario, if we have access of any user which is have limited rights. You can see here we already configured our AWS CLI, and we want to check which users rights or key I have. I have to specify the profile. So I configured this user's key in profile demo 1. So you can see here I have a right access of this user USR. I have a key already configured in my AWS CLI. Now what next I'm looking for? I'm just looking for what rights does this user have? What is the policy which is attached to this user? This is the second step. So first step, I know that the user I compromised is USR user in IAM. What rights, what policy that adds to is we will discuss on later on. So you can see here this command is used. First we will list down all the policy, managed policy which is attached to this user. This is a command. I know the username is USR. Perfect. So you can see here, this is the policy which is attached to this user. You can specify profile also to check if I have a rights to list it down all the policies or permissions. So specify demo 1. Yes, you have a rights to list down the policy permission attached to this users. Now what next? I'm looking for what is basically this policy does contain, what permission this policy have. I'm going for the second point, retrieve information about the specified managed policy. So you can copy this one, open a new tab, paste it here. Now you have to specify the policy ARN. So this is a policy ARN which is attached to this user. Just copy it here, paste it here. So this will give you an idea about what does policy contain, what is the information regarding this policy. So this is the policy name, policy ID, ARN, and the default version of this policy. So you can see a default version of this policy is V2. Okay, now what other versions are there in this policy? So let's look for those things. So list of information about version of the specified managed policy. So list of policy versions there. So just copy this one, paste it here, copy the policy ARN and paste it here. So you can see here there is two versions of this policy, and this is the default policy which is attached to this user. Now what permission does it contain? So let's check about what permission this policy does contains. So retrieve information about a specified version of the specified managed policy. Just copy this one, fill here, open a new tab. Now you need to specify two things, the policy ARN and version. And just copy this policy ARN. So this is the policy ARN, and version ID is currently, you can see here there is a two version, but which is the default version is V2. Let's see what is there in V2. What is there in V1? List user, put user policy. So these are the two options there. It can only be list the number of list of all the users, but not what is policy attached. What about second version, which is the default version which is currently used? So in this case you can list it down all the IAM resources. So this is how you can check what policy, what version does it contain. And what about other information? So it's contained two actions. One is listed down all the IAM related resources, list policy, list users, list roles, all these things. And second thing, this user also have this permission, put user policy. That means this user can attach inline policies to any other user or the same user. And this is how we can take advantage of this one. We know that this user can change, can update the policy, inline policy to any user or the same user. Let's create a policy, or let's administrator policy and attach this policy to the same user, so that if we can escalate our privilege. So you can see here, suppose I created one policy which is administrator policy. Let's check where is this policy stored. Suppose I created this policy, which effect means allow action everywhere, all the actions, put, get, delete, update, every action you can perform, and resources on all the resources. That means this is the administrator policy I'm going to attach, or I'm going to embed it in this user, because I have a put user permission here. You can see here I have a put user policies here, permissions I have, so I can attach it to perform a privilege escalation. So how we can attach it? So you can just simply copy this one, copy this one. Let's move to the desktop, because this policy is stored in the desktop. Now what next? You specify file. File is there. It is the file name of this policy, the administrator policy.json. It is there in file. Let's copy this one, .json. This is the file name I have, .json. You have to specify the policy name, what policy name you want to use for inline policy. Suppose priv esc policy name, and which user you want to assign this policy, or you want to embed it in which user. So I'm adding this username USR. So this is how we can attach the policy. We can embed it inline policy to any user. This is used for put user policies, which is used for attach the policy or embedded policy to any user. Okay, you have to specify policy name. Okay, this is should be small. Perfect. So this policy is attached. This inline policy is attached to this user USR. Now let's look at this. So I attached this policy because I have rights. Now let's look at the inline policy which is embedded to this user. So let's first check the policy attached to embedded. Let's first check list of managed attached policy. You can see at the same policy which is there is no changes in managed policy. Now we are looking for the inline policies. So just change this one, copy this one, username you have to specify USR. And you can see here prev ESC, currently the name which we mentions, it will be attached this policy here. Now I just want to check what is this policy contain in this inline policy. Or you can, so suppose this policy attached to this one. We already discussed how you can enumerate the policy information and what is there in inline policy. But in this case, I'm just looking for the if. So here you have to specify IAM get user policy. Policy name is prev and username is USR. Okay, you can see here this is the policy which is embedded in this user. Effect allow, action star and resource star. So that means we embedded administrator policy in taking of put user permissions. So this is how you can perform a privilege escalation. Let's see if I have a right to check S3. You can see here, I can list it down, or I can perform all the actions there. And what the permission does I contains? STS get caller identity ID. Okay, let's leave this. You can see here I'm using the same rights, but in the previous case I don't have administrator policy attached to my users, but currently take advantage of put user permissions and attach administrator policy to this user. You can attach this policy to any other user to perform a privilege escalation. So this is how you can perform a privilege escalation using take advantage of AWS IAM misconfigurations. So this is all about privilege escalation using IAM. We will discuss other thing in our later section. So apart from this method, there are another method also which is used to perform a privilege escalation. So suppose this is a method attaching a policy to user. If you have this attach user policy permissions, you can attach the policy to a group if you have this rights, this permissions. Attach a policy to a role if you have attached role policies. Create a user access key if you have this rights. So this is how if you have you can perform the privilege escalations using these methods if you have this rights. So there is a lot more way to perform a privilege escalations. So you have to check what permission do you have and how you can take advantage of the permissions. So you can see here, just now we exploit this, IAM permissions, where if we have this put user policy, you can create or update a inline policy. You can see here, this is a policy I have, and I created or updated inline policy to any user. So this is how I take advantage of this one. You can use any other policies or permissions to perform privilege escalations. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you.